When we imagine the oceans of the age of dinosaurs, we imagine teeth. We picture reptiles the size of buses, jaws lined with cones of enamel, torpedo-shaped hunters cutting through warm, shallow seas. We picture bone, armor, and skulls built both to kill and to last. And we picture these things for a simple reason. They are what survived. Almost everything we know about that lost world, we know because it left something hard behind. A tooth, a vertebra, a shell pressed into stone. But the fossil record is not a photograph of the past. It is closer to a filter, and a filter only keeps what it was built to catch. Which raises a question most of us never think to ask. What if some of the deadliest hunters in those ancient seas left almost no trace at all? Not because they were rare, not because they were small, but because their bodies were made of the one thing that stone almost never remembers. There may have been a predator hidden in the Cretaceous Ocean for tens of millions of years, moving through waters we thought we understood. And the reason we never saw it is the strangest part of the whole story. This animal was not hidden because it was small. It was hidden because almost everything about it was designed to disappear. To understand how something enormous can vanish completely, you first have to understand what it takes to become a fossil. It is harder than most people think. A dead body has to win a race against decay and scavengers and time, and the surest way to win is to have hard parts: bone, teeth, shell. That is why the ancient ocean, as we know it, is a museum of skeletons. Now, picture the opposite of a skeleton, an animal with no bones at all, no spine, no skull. A body that is almost entirely muscle, water, and nerve, soft enough, in the living version, to pour itself through a gap no wider than its own eye. Picture an octopus, in a sense, the perfect anti-fossil. And the more closely you look at one, the stranger it becomes. Its arms do not simply follow orders from a central brain. They taste, they touch, they act with a surprising kind of independence, as if the animal thinks with its whole body rather than just its head. Its skin can sense light. It can shift color and texture in an instant, dissolving the animal into the water behind it. It is one of the most complete disappearing acts in the natural world, performed by a creature with almost nothing solid inside it. And when an octopus dies, it does not leave a skeleton behind. Within days, there's essentially nothing left. Which means that if a giant octopus had truly lived in the seas of the dinosaurs, it could have slipped out of the fossil record entirely. It could have been enormous, dangerous, and everywhere, and still leave us nothing to find. Almost nothing. Because there is one part of an octopus hard enough to last. One small, dense structure that does not rot away with the rest. The beak. An octopus beak sits at the center of its arms, and it looks a little like the beak of a parrot. It is made of chitin bound with hardened protein, the same kind of tough material found in the shells of insects, and it is dense enough that, under the right conditions, it can survive for millions of years after everything around it has vanished. And that is exactly what a team went looking for. In 2026, researchers led by Hokkaido University, publishing in the journal Science, reported something strange. In rock recovered from Vancouver Island and from Hokkaido in northern Japan, they had found more than a dozen fossilized beaks sealed inside stone. And they faced a problem. They could not crack the rock open without destroying the fragile thing hidden inside it. So they did the only thing that could work. They ground the fossil away, one paper-thin slice at a time, photographing each surface in the instant before it was gone, and rebuilt the vanished beaks, whole, inside a computer. And when they finally looked closely at what they had recovered, they found something that turned a quiet fossil into a mystery. The beaks were worn, chipped, scratched, polished smooth. On some specimens, the very tip had been noticeably worn down, as if it had been driven again and again against something that refused to give. That kind of damage does not come from eating soft fish. It comes from crushing, from biting down over and over across a lifetime on something hard enough to fight back. Shell, possibly even bone. So sit with what that single clue implies. Something in that ancient ocean had a mouth strong enough to slowly grind itself down against armored prey. Something soft-bodied, something that left behind only this one small, battered witness. What could wear down a mouth like that, and how big would it have to be? Here's where the story turns. Because in living octopuses, the size of the beak scales with the size of the animal. Compare beak to body across enough modern species, and the beak becomes a ruler you can read backward, from a small, hard fragment to the whole soft creature it belonged to. When the researchers applied that method to the largest of these fossil beaks, the number that came back was hard to accept. This was not a normal octopus. At the upper end of the estimates, this animal may have reached as much as 62 feet, long enough to stand among the largest invertebrates ever described. The full range runs from around 22 feet up to that startling 62-foot figure, roughly 7 to 19 meters. Even the low end would make it an enormous octopus. But that upper number is exactly where some scientists urge caution. Its beak alone was larger than a giant squid's, and at the top of that range, if the numbers hold, its body would have rivaled the giant squid we still hunt for in the deep today, and rivaled even mosasaurus, the reptile we tend to picture as the ruler of those seas. Researchers have given it a name, Nanaimoteuthis haggarti. The genus was not entirely new to science. What was new, what was almost impossible to believe, was its scale. Now rebuild it carefully from what the fossils and the living animals together allow us to say. It may have belonged to the finned octopuses, the deep water cirrets. So picture it. 8 enormous arms, webbed together like a living cloak, a pair of fins near the head, a body without a single bone to slow it down. And at the center of those arms, the beak we already met, dense and sharp and strong enough to break a shell. And then, perhaps something stranger than its size. Living octopuses carry hundreds of millions of neurons, most of them threaded through the arms rather than packed into the brain, so that each limb can almost hunt on its own. If this giant shared that design, it would have been not just large, but coordinated, capable, and very hard to escape. Some researchers argue the beaks hint at something stranger. On certain specimens, one side is worn more heavily than the other. In living animals, that kind of lopsided wear can be a sign of handedness, of favoring one side of the body, which might point to a complex, capable brain behind the beak. But not every scientist accepts that reading. Asymmetric wear can have more than one cause, and a worn beak alone is a thin thread on which to hang a mind. Still, a discovery on this scale only deepens the mystery instead of solving it. Because a predator this large, hunting in a crowded sea, should have scattered evidence across the whole record. Bodies, impressions, something. So why had we never seen it? And if you enjoy stories like this, ancient oceans, strange predators, and the clues they left behind, consider subscribing. Because the deeper we look into prehistory, the stranger the ocean becomes. To answer that, we have to travel to the late Cretaceous and to the northern edge of the Pacific. This giant may have hunted these waters around 86 million years ago. The rock that holds its beaks on what is now Vancouver Island and the coast of northern Japan was once open sea floor, a cool, deep ocean on the far rim of the Cretaceous world. Not the shallow, sunlit sea we usually imagine. Darker water, colder, the kind of place where a soft, silent hunter could move unseen. We know this vanished ocean almost entirely from the animals that left their bones behind. Mosasaurs moved through Cretaceous seas like this one, giant marine reptiles with jaws built for seizing and slicing. Sharks patrolled the water, ammonites drifted through it, distant cousins of the octopus that had kept their shells, coiled tight inside hard armor. We can picture those reptiles in exact detail, every tooth, every vertebra, because they left us their skeletons. This giant left us a single worn beak. We cannot say for certain what it hunted, but hard, resistant prey, ammonites sealed in coiled armor, other shelled animals, perhaps even young marine reptiles, is exactly the kind of food that could grind a beak down over a lifetime. The evidence points to a predator that dealt in things built to survive being bitten, a hunter with no bones and no shell of its own, moving through cold and crowded water, leaving nothing behind but the mouth it hunted with. So what did it actually do down there? And how would we ever know? We cannot know the exact scene. The evidence gives us only an outline. But if it hunted anything like its living relatives, a hunt might have looked something like this. Imagine deep blue-black water where the sunlight has already given out. Imagine an ammonite drifting through it, safe inside its coiled shell, the way it has always been safe. And imagine, in the dark just beyond it, something patient, not a shape, not an edge, only stillness, and then a movement the prey never has time to understand. The octopus does not chase. It hangs in the shadow, folded and unhurried, letting the distance close on its own. Then, the arms unfold. The suckers find their grip and turn the shell in the dark. The beak finds the seam. And it closes. It may have happened 10,000 times across a single lifetime, each strike leaving one more faint scratch on a beak that would, tens of millions of years later, become the only thing left to tell us any of it ever happened. But we have to be honest about the line we just crossed. That scene is reconstruction, built carefully on top of real evidence, not a filmed record of a real day in the Cretaceous. And that is why we have to imagine it at all. Because almost everything that made this animal alive, the arms, the skin, the eyes, the brain, the hunt itself, was never meant to survive. Only the beak. Step back from this one animal and a far larger idea comes into focus. If a predator on this scale could slip through the record almost without a trace, then the record itself is not the whole story. It is a story told by the survivors, the animals with bones, teeth, and shells, the ones built to be remembered, everything soft, everything boneless, everything built the way an octopus is built, may be missing from it almost entirely. Absence in the fossil record is not the same as absence in the sea. There may have been whole kinds of predators in those ancient waters that we will never hold in our hands. Hunters that lived, killed, and vanished so completely that a single worn beak is all they left. So here's the strangest part of the whole story. It is not that a giant octopus may have hunted in the seas of the dinosaurs. It is that almost everything about it was designed to disappear. And if that is true of one animal, hidden in plain sight for all this time, then we are left with a far larger question. How much of the ancient ocean is still missing from the story we thought we knew? If you enjoyed this journey into the hidden side of the ancient ocean, consider subscribing. And keep watching to explore another mystery from the ancient ocean.